Hello and welcome to Gary's Garage. Today I'm finally coming to the job that I've been both looking forward to and dreading at the same time, and that is to clean the intake and the valves, intake valves of carbon goo buildup on the Volkswagen TDI. Now I'm looking forward to it because the car hasn't been running very well at part throttle, at light throttle, been surging a bit, which is usually an indicator of that it's plugged up or the swirl plates are binding up. So I expect to find a lot of carbon. We're at just about 140,000 kilometers, which is about 85, 90,000 miles. So it's due. This is the time that it needs to be done. I'm dreading it because it's a filthy, dirty job. I can keep the outside of the engine clean, engine bay clean, but I cannot keep the inside clean. Diesel has a way of just getting black and sooty and messy. So let's just go over what we've got to do this job today. So we'll start working on the engine bay, get the cover off and stuff like that. I've got a plastic bin to put the parts in. I've got a jug of degreaser coming, but I also have some seafoam intake cleaner. That will do good at breaking down, even though this is designed to spray into the engine while it's running and condition your cylinders and all that stuff. It is a pretty aggressive solvent, and it should work to help break down some of that carbon buildup. I've got some choke and carb cleaner, which also works well. We'll see which works better, and then when we're finished, some brake clean to do that. I've got some small round brushes and some square brushes that do that, and of course lots of towels and rags and stuff like that to work on the cleanup. And the other thing we're going to need is probably more than one set of rubber gloves. Okay, so that's enough farting around. Let's get this on the road. We're gonna start by taking the engine cover off, release this. This is a coolant line. Yeah, that's a coolant line, part of the return system from the tank, and then just pull straight up. And there we go, and that should reveal the business end of the engine. There's lots of stuff to take off. The intake tube, there's mass airflow, the throttle, and I know the control is different. There's a lot of attachments. I'm not even sure what this is. Probably the engine crankcase ventilation hose comes back into here. So this is literally where the dirt starts. It's right here. This comes up from the intercooler. So this needs to come off, and then we need to take the top part of the intake off. This is a plastic one. Earlier models had a aluminum one, which was a lot more robust for cleaning and stuff. But nonetheless, we can get at that. And then we want to start disconnecting things, but we want to take as little as possible off. Luckily, we don't have to take the fuel injector lines off or anything like that. So, okay, let me get the gloves on and let's get started. Okay, a couple things we're going to do here. So, first off, keep in mind when you have any electrical connector that you're going to disconnect on a Volkswagen, especially an aged one, they do get a little brittle, but they're kind of, they feel like they're spring loaded, but what it is the seal, the rubber seal, and you can compress it. So to take them off, instead of just trying to press on the button, you push it in, press the button, and then you release, and that way it comes off easy. If you need to get them out of the way, you can pull them out and pull them aside, and typically they'll come back to where they're naturally in. I'm going to take the charge pipe off, and this is a 7mm. Just do it manually here. My favorite way of doing this, if you can make it work. This one's got a little captive thing to hold it on the end so that it doesn't come off. There we go. And in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the whole charge pipe off completely and get it out of the way. Well, at least that's the idea. A little twisting, and there we go. And a little bit of oil. That's not to be unexpected. There we go. So to prevent any oh shit, I'm gonna take a clean shop towel or microfiber towel and stick this in the hole, and that'll prevent anything from falling inside. Now we can work on getting some of this other stuff out. I think the thing to do is take the dipstick out. Your car may not have a dipstick, may have a plug. I added this, not so much to check the level, because the computer does that, but to check the condition of the oil. So this is the throttle plate. Actuator's on the front, the connector is on the back. And again, there's another tab. Push in, push the tab, and that should hang there right out of the way. And now we can take off the throttle plate. So we might have a pretty good vantage there. So let's see if we can do this. It is a T27. I've got a T27 with a wobble extension. I'm not sure if these are right. Yep. There you go, and there's the throttle plate. Needs to be clean, but you know, it's not that bad. Make sure this is captive. Yeah. Okay, then I can peel that off of there. Move that off. Just want to make sure this is released. There we go. And then this will separate when we need to. All the same. Is there a fourth one? There either should be, yes there is. And I think the way to do it is with a long extension. Get at it through here. You can see just get it through here and into there. There we go. Now, obviously there's a trick to everything. So I figured the best thing to do is remove this pipe, this ventilation pipe, and get the, it's kind of hard to show you guys. And there, you got to kind of work your way around the oil dipstick tube and this EGR tube. Okay, well that's tight. Alright, so this is where I'm going to use my magnet to retrieve these bolts. Where'd she go? There she is. Magnet on a stick. And here we go. There. Not loose enough. Yeah, let me just pull that out and then bring you back. Okay, the tube is now out. It has a metal gasket on it. Might have to replace that, I'm not sure. And then of course this clamp that goes on. There's an O-ring here of some kind or some goo to seal it. There's 3 bolts that hold, this is a bracket that hold this on here, and those screws are upside down. There's an interference on one of them with this bracket. You know, I'm not too sure what these engineers are smoking, but it just doesn't make it easy at all. So even though there's 3 T30 Torx underneath this, only one of them is holding it onto the bracket, the one in the back on the right side. So if you can get into that one, blind, there we go, and then we should be able to lift out this part of the intake. And there you can see the soot buildup. I'm not going to disturb any of it until we get it over to the tank, to the wash tank. So it's not as bad as I was expecting. Now let's take a look inside mass airflow. Oh yeah. I've got a secondary throttle. That's a secondary throttle. Okay, well, there, that's some build-up for you. Yeah, we got some work to do there. Okay, so obviously this bracket doesn't have to come off. I've got it loose. I'm going to reinstall this bolt in here. I won't tighten it until I've got the intake, that part of the charge pipe, back in. All right, move on. Next step. There's a few connectors that you have to take off, and including this one. Now, just to show you, there's a little gray tab, and you have to pull up on that tab, and then you can take the connector out. It's obviously, you know, it's a little stiff, so I used the pick tool and just slowly pry it on the side, making sure I don't break it. But there you go, and then you can move that aside. And then the next thing up is this guy here. This is in the way. This uses the classic you break it, you buy it connector by Volkswagen, and so I'm not going to try it in place because it's a little on the hard side and I'm not sure if I can get it up. But I do have to take this bracket the solenoid is connected to off because one of the screws is on the intake, which is coming out. So I'm just going to take this bracket off, and we may be able to just move it out of the way. They're all T30s. Earlier in the video I mentioned that the first throttle, the throttle plate was T27. It wasn't. It was T30. It seems that just about all the connectors are T30 or 5mm Allen. So get those off, and then I should be able to lift this out of the way. And all right, I was just doing that last section without the camera pointed at the. So what I had to do is take this solenoid out, and it's held on with one screw into the plastic plenum. It's kind of like almost like a wood screw. It's a plastic screw, and then one machine screw, both T30, that goes onto the. I'm not too sure what that is. On top of the V, that's aluminum, but anyway, it's into aluminum. So probably part of the coolant. Not reservoir, but the coolant system. Anyway, so we got to keep working. Now I got to start taking all these lines off and stuff and getting access to these T30s to hold the intake down. And there's going to be a few more electrical connectors that I either have to get out of the way or disconnect. We'll have to work on that. And you know, you want to, when you're doing this, you want to have a lot of patience as to not to damage anything and pull everything out of the way so that you're good to go. But don't rush, because could end in a trip to your local Volkswagen dealer. And these days, with parts being on shortage, the last thing you want is to be in the middle of the job and can't get a part. Alright, so I got these two connectors off. Again, you got to be careful. The key is to get these in, and you can use like a pick tool to pry these back. Push in, pry back, pull out. And just be patient, you know, and try not to break them. Same for this deal. You can probably see my marks I left with my pick tool, because this one's very stiff. And get it off, and then, but to take the bracket off, you know, to get this stuff clear so that you can get the intake off, this bracket should come off. To do that, you might be able to leave the bracket on, but is that this part of the connector goes through like a fork in the bracket. So I've got the screwdriver in the bottom, and then just slowly working it up. Try not to break anything, obviously, and I need to get something else underneath to pry, but you get the idea. Just slowly work it up until you can get it out, and then that disconnects it, and you'll need that off to get the intake off. So keep working. Towards the back of the intake, there's this, I'm going to call it a tray, that holds some of the vacuum. I'm not sure what these lines are for, because they go to the injectors. And there's a wiring bundle and so on. But these are mounted to the intake with some, guess what, T30s. There's one at each end. You got to move this hose out of the way and just push it to the back, and then you can get into and then loosen those up, and then we'll be able to maybe deal with it wholesale instead of having to take all the individual stuff off. I'll do that and show you. there is a bracket at the bottom of the intake, right at this first stage of the swirl plates, and there's just a T30 bolt that goes through. Now there's a little bracket that bolts onto the front of, I'm not sure if that's the water pump or whatever. Anyway, that's loose now, so the front, so now I can work on getting these out. I think we can coax it out. So I was able to loosen the screws with a T30 screwdriver, and it'd be nice if it was longer, it'd be easier. Long tool is the best. There's screws at various locations, and you can see some of them here. There's one there, the front, this side, a little further back underneath all of this, and then there's one at the back on each side. And there might be another two that I haven't seen yet, but I'm gonna keep looking to see if I can see them. But once I've confirmed that I've got them all and got them out, then we'll be able to start moving. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of pulling on this to get confirmation that it moves. And once it kind of breaks away and starts moving, I'll be able to see if I missed any fasteners. If it doesn't break away, obviously there's a fastener. Don't want to pull too hard, but we'll just keep going away. So long T30, bit tough with a screwdriver, but if you can get longer T30 socket with extension, it would be easy that way. I'll keep working. Okay guys, so what I've done since, got these connectors off. I've had to take these connectors off to give the wiring harness some room to move, so I could get down and get the intake bolt there. The one that's like crazy to get to is back here, and if you can see, there's a hard fuel line pipe right there, and that actually blocks access to the screw, the last screw, to get this off. So I have to disconnect the other end of that fuel pipe, and once that's disconnected, then I should be able to move it over enough to get a screwdriver in there, so to get that screw out. So I've also taken off the intake pipe, the intake to the turbo. I still have to put a rag in there. And anyway, I'm gonna keep motoring along here and keep you updated. It's hard to work on this and then shoot at the same time. So we'll just I'll do what I can to show you what's going on and what to do. Well, I was able to get this screw loose. So what to do? Take these fuel lines, or return lines, out of the holder, and that'll help give you access to this fuel line in the end of the fuel rail. You can see the threads there, and so this pipe now is slightly loose, and I was able to get a screwdriver in there just to pry back enough to get this screwdriver started into the screw. Then you can pull it out, and then you can loosen it, and that is the last screw holding down the intake. So the intake should move now. Well, I'm going to do a little work on prying, make sure I've got it out, and prying it up here, and I'll show you as I pull it out. Well, if you can see, we've got the intake up. It still doesn't want to come out, so it has a tendency to catch on this and catch on that. So the key is getting it, I think it has to go up on this side, but of course there's a fuel line, which I may have to pry off the back of the intake there. And that's that same one that goes down on the inside, which has been disconnected from the rail. so I can't show you and do this at the same time, but I'm gonna have to get in with a long screwdriver or something, and make sure that this is out of the way so that I can get the intake up on this side, and then that way there's this pressure sensor on here, the fuel rail pressure sensor. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. You have to be able to move the intake up this way to get it out, so the other side has to be off first. So I'll keep fighting with it. I'll let you know. The intake is off. So unfortunately I couldn't film the actual removal, but then again, the upside is you don't get to hear my foul language. This was the craziest thing you can imagine. This high pressure fuel line, which comes from the pump, comes up, interferes with this screw here, so you got to push it, so it has to be disconnected so you can push it to get in, and then you can pull it up. But the line also goes over the top of the intake right here, and it keeps hanging up, so you can't really pull the back up, so you have to pull it out. But you can't pull it up because there's a hook to lift the engine. Well, you could take the hook off with these triple squares, but there's no access unless you take the oil filter and the oil filter housing off to do that. So I opted instead to loosen the fuel rail on the driver's side, and that way I could get the intake up and beyond this pressure sensor, and then once it's up, then the rest of it will come up enough so you can pull it out. So it is a real bugger, but you know, it's not all bad news, because now that it's hard for me to show, you can't really see in there. It's just, let me get the flashlight. You can see the intake, and I can get a little bit of video of the valves, at least on those. You can't really get them on these square intakes. The valves are like down this way. You can see a little bit, but they're actually clean. There's no real build. There's a little bit of soot on them, but they're actually pretty clean. Yeah, you can tell I'm sweating. It's like 90 degrees today. Anyway, there's a coolant pipe that has to come out, disconnect to get over the prod where the engine cover goes on at the back of the intake. It sticks up and it catches. So this coolant, and it's on the coolant lines on this side, you have to disconnect it. This quick connect wouldn't release, so I had to take the line out of this standpipe. So it's just one little frustration thing after another. I had to take the glow plug connectors off this side so I could get the intake to move over a little bit and give me the clearance I needed at this corner. So I had to be able to push it over, but then this was in the way. So needless to say, it's going to be a squeeze getting it back on, but you know, I'll get it clean, and then hopefully I'll be able to shoot some more video of the whole thing when it's going back on. Anyway, thanks for. So I've started to clean up. You can see the crud that's come out already. I've got two brushes. I've got a brass bristle brush, which is good on anything that's aluminum, and a plastics brush, which is good on anything that's brass or plastic. And so you don't want to scratch the surfaces or whatever, but you know, I just sprayed some of the stuff off and let it soak a little bit, and then I'm going to brush it. The other thing is I prepared a screwdriver, and what I did is sanded all the sharp edges off so that if you use this to scrape any hard material off, it doesn't scratch. So I'm going to do that as well. I got lots of cleanup to do. Kind of would be boring for you to see, but I'll show you little bits of it as we go along, and then I'll show you the clean parts before we start putting it back together. Oops. Okay, it's starting to come along. You're starting to see metal in there. That looks a lot better, so I think I can dry this one up and put it aside. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect because, well, it's going to get sooty right away anyway. So, but definitely it's one heck of a lot better than it was when we started. Okay, so now I've got the other components to get cleaning, and I'll do the intake last. I got to clean the bin back out. But that's a pile of muck that's come out of that. Alright, so there is the throttle assembly. Nice and clean. Put it along here with the swirl plate. Now we're going to go to the charge pipe or intake runner, and we want to remove this. There's a little notch. You can see that notch there, and that aligns with this pin to make sure you put it back in, because inside it's different from one side to the other, so you don't want to get it backwards. But this part definitely needs to be cleaned, so we're going to make sure we do that before we move on. I've been cleaning this part of the tube. There's a little bit of hardened carbon inside that is reluctant to come off, but it's definitely clean enough in my books. So we're just going to put it back together and put it in the clean pile, and then the last thing is the intake. Well, there is the intake, and I've cleaned it. Well, I'm going to say as good as I can. The difficulty, of course, is getting into all the passages. So I did a combination of the fluids, let it soak, scrubbed it, used the long brush with the flexible rod to get as far in as I could, did around the ports, cleaned it up, and cleaned up the outside. Did the same from the where the throttle split goes. So this is a dual plane, call it a dual plane or a dual intake. So the interesting thing is that each plane feeds all 6 cylinders on one valve, and the other plane or the other passage feeds the other intake valves. So each of the 2 intake valves has a separate runner which runs down to the throttle, so that when you're under light throttle, you're going through the small passage, and then only when you get on the full beans does it go through the other passage. So air only flows, it's like it runs like a 6 intake valve, and then until you put your foot in it, then it goes to 12 intake valves. So there we go. So I just got a little bit more cleanup to do on the outside, and so that is the disassembly and the cleaning. And so I'm gonna break off now for the day, and I've covered the ports with rags. I'm going to do a little bit more cleanup on the engine, and then and then that's it for today. And then tomorrow I'm going to start reassembling everything. So hopefully there's less swearing. Well, you guys must probably miss that, but yeah, there's less swearing going back together. But you never know. I think putting that intake in is still going to be a real pain in the drain. Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching.
So before I put everything back together, I'm just going to try and show you what I'm seeing in the intake on the heads. You can see the tops of the valves, and I haven't touched this. This is like crazy clean. I am just so impressed here. Harder to see these ports. Get the flashlight in here, but there really isn't any buildup. You can see there's a little bit of debris in there. I'm going to have to use some compressed air to get that debris out. That's probably from the process of removing the intake. Some debris must have fallen in, so I'm going to use some compressed air to blow that out best I can. I'm guessing that a little bit may have gotten into an open cylinder, but that is typical. I've gone through them, and this is what they are all the way through. So there's really no need to attack that part with anything. I can just leave it as is. So that simplifies this job. All the parts are clean. I think I showed you this before. All the parts are cleaned, and we're ready to go back in. The intake, as much as I could get down inside, is clean. So the key really is getting this back on, because it was a real, as Ed would say, it was a real faff to get off. So it just interfered with this and that, you know. So it's going to be a bit of a battle. So I'm going to blow out these intakes, or vacuum, and clean up as much as possible. And I might pull this one glow plug connector off, and so that they give us a little bit more maneuvering room, and just clean up the little bit of coolant or diesel that's deposited, because I've loosened up this rail here, and yeah, the supply line to this rail is loose. So well, let's get this cleaned up, and then make sure the surface is good to go, and put her back together. Start on the process. To clean up this cylinder head surface for the intake, I'm just using a little bit of the seafoam. I've put some shop towels in the intake ports, and you can see that the ones I haven't cleaned have a little bit of carbon around, and we just want those gaskets to seal as well as possible. So what I've done is just make sure that no debris gets inside, and then just spray a little seafoam on it, and then just with a rag you can just rub it, and the carbon comes off. If there's some minute amounts left, though, I mean, it's nothing to worry about. You just want a nice smooth surface so that the gaskets work. You don't want any leaking in here, and so we can do that just by, don't need a scraper, you know, where this is aluminum, and there's a risk of putting a big scratch, and a scratch can cause a leak. Better off using soft materials and a chemical to get this as clean as possible. So that, I'll continue with that. I just want to show you how I removed a little bit of debris that got in the holes when I was taking the intake off. When I say the holes, the intake ports to the head, on the head. So what I did is I've set up my shop vac, and just put in I think it's a fuel line hose on the end. Turn on, and you can control how much vacuum by putting your finger, and it was successful. And if you can see, it was successful in getting any debris that was in there. So we're
we're good to go. Some of the residual buildup around these ports wasn't coming off with just cleaner, so I'm using a little. This is actually 1500 sandpaper, and it kind of acts a little bit like a scouring. You don't have to press hard, and it can actually remove scratches, but just to get it to clean up a little bit. Always go in a straight line, and usually across so that you're parallel to the sealing surface. Just some little gentle stuff, and there we go. And then we can clean that up after with a bit more of the sea foam or the brake clean. The brake clean is going to be the final one anyway. There we go. Okay. So before we reinstall the intake, I want to change all the gaskets, all these. I'm not too sure whether they're neoprene or what they're silicone or whatever, but they're all in good condition, and they're still quite proud, and they still spring back because they'll compress them and they still spring back. So they're good. But I did get a new set, and I figured, well, you know, might as well put the new ones in. This I'm probably not pulling back out again while idling this car. And so therefore it doesn't seem to make sense to, for the sake of 20 bucks or whatever it was. The their L-ring bushings, there's the gaskets, there's the part number, and it comes in a set for this intake. So there's just some little tabs that help hold it in place. Once I've got them all in, I'll just clean them up. To take them out, I'm using a pick. You want to get down at the bottom. The key thing is not to scratch any of the plastic. They come up pretty easy. But there, you get the idea. I'll continue on my way. Once all these are in, I'll just re-clean the surface, and then we're going to be reinstalling. Okay, moment of truth, I guess. All the gaskets are installed, ready to go. So the other thing to note is I've taken the fuel rail out of the driver's side, and that should give me some more room to go back and forth and tilting and so on. So the idea is to get in here, get underneath the things that are in the way, trying not to hang up the gotta get just beyond over here. Just trying to get underneath the fuel line, high pressure fuel line. This side's just so tight. And on this side here, we've got all these coolant lines. This has to be on the front side. There we go. It is now down. Now there's some dowels. You need to make sure the dowels are lined up, and it helps to hold the intake in place. And there it is. It's back in. So what I'm going to do, there's obviously, as if you watch the removal, getting some of the screws out, it was really difficult. It's going to be even more difficult going back in. So I'm going to start with some of the easy access ones just to hold it in place, and then I'll slowly work on getting the more difficult screws in. Anyway, hang on. Got one screw in, one over on this side, and this, you know, just as a reminder, this is plastic, so we'll get these installed, and then we'll go around and snug them up, and then we'll torque them. Make sure you don't cross thread them. Any binding, stop, go back, make sure you're straight, then go in. Alright, no sense in you watching this, I'll just get it done. I may show you the more tricky ones because there may be a process to that. It may be hard to see, but what I've done is I've used a magnet and gone through the front holding the screw, and then I'm using the T30 screwdriver. It goes back just behind the intake, and you can peek through the front. I was able to get it to line up. You can see it there. This thing will focus, probably not. The camera's not that good. But then from there, I can now start to turn it in and pull the magnet out. And then, oops, I don't know if you can see in there. Get the screw to go down. I can tighten it later, but that is the most difficult one. Second most difficult is the one on the other side, but there's a bit more room there. Again, it might be hard to see, but just beyond there's the access hole. And you can get the screwdriver, T30 screwdriver, or whatever you're using, to go straight down. And it doesn't quite line up with the hole. Oh, I got to be on the other side of the fuel line. There we go. That's it, right there. So I should be able to bring the nut in on the magnet from this side or from the left side where the light is right now. But I'll see what I can do. I'll show you. So there I have the screw on the magnet, and I'll get it underneath. And now I won't be able to show you this, I don't think. Pull the screwdriver up, the T30, and then just work the work the bolt into the hole, which it is now in the hole slightly. Now I'll get the T30 on the top. And there it is. And I can turn that one in. So those are the two most difficult ones done. And the other ones aren't so bad, but same kind of process. Use the magnet to get it in place and then screw it in. All the bolts, all the fasteners that hold the intake are in and tightened. I couldn't find any torque specs on it. However, knowing that it's plastic, it's a T30, it's a equivalent to if you had like a 10 millimeter, and in plastic it's going to be about 5 foot-pounds of torque. And so that's essentially as hard as you can do with a screwdriver, and then a little dink, and that's it. So that's what I've done. Obviously you don't want to crack the plastic. All you really need to do is compress those port gaskets. They're flexible, and as it pushes down, it will flex and create the seal, and that's all you need to do. So that's what I've done. The next step is I'm going to put this fuel rail back in. It goes in. There's 2 bolts. There's these big triple squares that hold it in. I want to get it positioned with the lines. Get the lines on. Get the bolts in, and then tighten that part up. And then there's going to be a lot of dealing with the connectors, rerouting the lines. I've got this wiring harness thing, just buttoning everything back up, and that's going to take a lot of time. So I'll just give you quick reviews of this part as we go on, and then the main piece will be reassembling the EGR and intake, all right, and charge pipe. Thank you. I've got it back in, and I've just loosely installed the nuts that hold the high pressure fuel lines onto the injectors, and now I'm going to just slide these bolts in. Well, as I suspected, they're not absolutely perfect, so we just got to do a little tweaking. There we go. And but I didn't want to be doing the tweaking with the actual fuel lines. Let the fuel lines go where they go, and then I could push around these bolts. So let's get the triple square and we'll tighten this up. So when I took these off, I just used a regular 3/8 ratchet. They weren't that tight. Again, I can't get any torque references on all this stuff, so these are like an M8 and they're an 8.8, so about 20 foot-pounds is all I'm going to do with these. And all it is holding the fuel rail on, but because the bolts go through the intake, you just don't want to over tighten them. So that's between 15. They're flattening out a little bit, which means I'm probably compressing the intake. So that's as tight as I want to go. So somewhere between 15 and 20 foot-pounds to hold that on. All right. So to tighten the fuel lines, they use a tapered compression seal. It's not too dissimilar to the way brake lines are. So they have to be firm, but they actually don't need to be tight to make their seal. It's, so again, it's one of these things where you would think, oh, this is whatever, more thousands of PSI, but you don't really need to have them cranked up to get that kind of seal. The same like brake lines, which you can get thousands of PSI in the fluid. The steel lines are on that taper are crushable, or they crush a bit to create a really tight seal. There we go. I got the one on the back to do, which is the incoming line from the high pressure fuel pump. There's one on. There's one distribution line from the fuel pump going to each side. And that's the one we took off on that side, and it's the one we have to take off on this side. So get those back on, and then start working on all the other stuff we got to put on. Well, I've got all of the connections back on, all the fuel lines, electrical, vents, return line for the fuel, back to the filter. Still haven't put the intake pipe on from the filter. Took the opportunity to look inside, see what the condition of the turbo compressor vanes, where everything is good, no play in the bearing. So I just have a few more things to put on here, and I rewrapped the electrical, which I needed to undo to get access, and I kind of glued it back in, so once that dries I'll be able to take the clip off. But all the connectors are on, so now I'm going to start assembling the charge pipe. So I wanted to give you a little demonstration that although I had cleaned this up, I decided to use some of the degreaser that I got, just to show you how good it is. Just literally spray it on and the stuff is just coming right off. So I'm going to keep working with that, and if you want to know what that is, this is the stuff. It's by Walter Uno S. So great degreaser. And there's the assembly all cleaned. Now that is clean. Fantastic. Continuing with the reassembly, the EGR pipe. So two T20, T30 to hold this in. Best thing to do is put the screwdriver in first. Get it in the hole and thread it in, doing the hard one first, the one that's on the bottom. Not going to tighten it up fully yet. Just get it in kind of snug. Allow a little bit of movement. Get the next bolt. Dipstick standpipe is kind of in the way. Yeah. There we go. Going in fine. And then get the other one tighter. Okay. Tighten that one with a socket and ratchet there. Well, sometimes the way you take things apart doesn't necessarily mean that's the same way it goes back together. I had tightened this EGR pipe flange back up. However, I couldn't get to this bracket, the screw that holds the bracket. It's right here. So the pipe has to go down to get access to that. But I don't want to tighten that until this intake pipe or charge pipe is in place, because we need to adjust it to match. So I'm going to leave the bolts in and now install this guy. Now there's a little pin in the bottom there, and one of the bottom, and it's like a locating or dowel pin, but it's just plastic. But so you want to get that in, get one of these long bolts to hold this in the intake, get that in, and then the other one in, and then this should start coming together. Once this is tightened up, you should then be able to fit the charge pipe and tighten the charge pipe. But yeah, because the bracket moves. If I tighten the bracket in the wrong place, then we're nowhere. So we don't want to be nowhere. And of course, the one at the bottom on the inside is the trickiest to get to. But I think, as I showed when I was taking it apart, long extension from out here with the bit on the end should be pretty easy to get that tight. Let me get the tools and let's get it tight. So hopefully you can see all right. Don't crank one down totally without getting all the other ones snug. I've got a wobble stick extension here, which helps you deal with any slight misalignments. Pardon my hair. Might have to go by feel. There we go. You may notice that when I was taking apart, I was using the electric tool, but when I put back together, I prefer to do things by hands, especially with plastic parts, because if you break something, let's just say it won't be cheap. And be off to the Volkswagen dealer. And it's Sunday today, so you know we don't want that. Okay, we're doing pretty good here. Okay, that is in. Now there's a support screw down here that also needs to be tightened, and this needs to be installed, the clamp put on. So, but there's also a bolt that holds this clamp in to the charge pipe. So I'm going to get that screw started. Try and show you. Okay, well, hopefully you can see there's the screw goes under here, and of course I can't really get the screwdriver in there. Nope. Do it by hand and then use the ratchet. Now, keeping in mind this one goes into plastic with the brass bushing, so we do not want to tighten it overly. There we go. Now on these guys here, this is the long one, this is the short one. Keep that in mind, because this goes through a larger bushing into a deeper pocket, and this is a shallower pocket, uses a smaller one. Got that, and there we go. Screwdriver tight. Okay, next one is this guy here, and then we'll tighten the bolts that hold the pipe onto the engine. So let me see if I can set this camera up there. Yeah, that's not bad. That should work. And then I've got the Allen key socket. There we go. Come on. It wants to cross thread. Don't like it. Not quite on the ground. Okay, so there's a little latch that helps
hold this, and now it went in no problem without cross threading. Don't recall the orientation of this clamp, but again, not too tight. Okay, that's on now. I can just tighten the those fasteners on the charge pipe going into the engine. Those are T30s, so I'll get that tight and then retrieve my pliers. Alright, time for the throttle. And alright, so there is a key so that if you get confused on the orientation, you will. So you make sure that the gasket is good, it's proud. I didn't get a new one of these, but if this leaks, I can easily replace this. You don't have to go through the kind of work you would on the intake. Oh, let me get the bolts. Could be pretty handy. These ones are T30. You may have noticed that I was tightening these with the T30 when it's actually the 5mm hex Allen, and I was wondering when I was having a bit of an issue, but anyway, got it in. Here's one. Let me get another couple of bolts, and we'll get this. Sorry, they're in the cleaning tray. Last one. These ones go into aluminum, so you can be a little bit more aggressive, but there's really no need. I only want them to keep them from coming out, and you just want to rest this assembly up against the plastic charge pipe. The gasket does all the sealing. And that is that. So there's two electrical connectors to reconnect. This one right down here, it's been conveniently hanging, and when you hear it snap, it's in. There's one over here. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, there's one over here right on the other actuator, and that's it. Got the dipstick. Goes there, and then we've got this. Pulled my cloth out now. Put that on. Get the 7mm and tighten up the clamps. And then I'm going to do a double check of absolutely everything, and then it will be time to start it up. So that is the majority of the job. Here we go. Come on. That's it, I'll bring it back when I start. Well, this is the time that we find out if we did it right. Now, the low pressure side was not open, so therefore it will be fully primed. However, because we had the high pressure lines off and the fuel rail on this side removed, it's going to take a while to get that air out of the system. I expect it to maybe not fire right away, or if it does, it'll run rough for a little bit. Hopefully we don't get a check engine light or misfire code or anything like that. It should be short enough that it should just take off. So let's see how it goes here. Well, that crank time was longer than I even expected. But there it is, humming away. So I'm gonna get the, just do a double check for looking for fuel leaks in any of the high pressure fuel lines. Fuel rail, and then the pipes that go from one side to the other to the back of the fuel rail. Good, I don't see any leaking. Seems to be running fine. There we go. So if you're getting off here, thanks for watching Gary's Garage. This has been a bit of a tough one, a bit of a long one. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end. Thanks for watching Gary's Garage, and if you like what you see, please subscribe, and you can hit the bell for notifications so when a new video comes up you'll get notified, and then we'll see you on the next one. Well, obviously the long crank hasn't gone away. We've got a check engine light. We're going to have to do that, but I'm going to give it a drive here. I think maybe driving it might get the air out of the system, and then we can reset the code. Okay, so one code. Try the first module. Read codes. Stored codes. No chords. Oh, okay. Go back. Any pendings? No pendings. Probably in the other module. And module. Read codes. Stored codes. Fuel temp sensor circuit high. Interesting. Wonder if we got a connector that didn't snap back in properly. Well, let's try to erase this code. Yes. Erase done. Go back. And still got the long crank. It might do that if it doesn't know what the fuel temperature is. It goes to a default, which may take time. Read codes. Mill light's out. But the circuit high fuel temp sensor. Okay. Well, the P0183. I'm going to look that up. But that's interesting. The mill light is not on the dash. It's weird. Alright, well, I was checking over all my connections and I found this guy was not fully snapped in, and this makes perfect sense as it is in the fuel line, probably the return fuel line. I think so, either that or it's the feed to the high pressure pump. Not too sure which, but anyway, so I think the temperature sensor's in there. So let's see if we can clear this code now. The light is off. Read codes. No system, no fault found. Love that. Press the any key. Okay, that's it, that's done.